Hello and welcome to a post-match reaction to England versus Wales in the Six Nations. The game has just finished 12-6 to England after a very direct affair. And I am excited to say joining me for this chat is Jed from the Great Attacking Scrum podcast. How are you doing, sir?
I'm all right, Paul. I'm all right. Yeah, obviously, clearly both wearing our colours today as well. And yeah, just starting to let it sink in, I think.
Having listened to your podcast earlier in the week, I think a lot of the stuff that you have said came to fruition, that you were a bit worried if it turned into a kicking game with Patchell at 10, and you said that England would play a lot of 10-man rugby. And you guys are soothsayers. I mean, basically, that's a lot of what the game really was.
Yeah, I was rather hoping to be proved wrong, but it didn't turn out that way. I think it's tempting to say that Eddie Jones's mind games got to Reece Patchell, and I think there probably was a certain element of that. The conditions certainly didn't suit him at 10 today, and I think that the kicking game that Wales employed really played into England's hands, to be honest. And Brown was exceptionally good under the high ball and ran it back every single time. I think in a way we made it a bit easy for England, but they'd done the homework, and to be honest, I think we were the better side.
I just have a quick chat, I guess, about the pre-game stuff. Yeah, and obviously Eddie came out with a few comments. Alwyn Jones said, "Oh, I'll have a little chat with Uncle Eddie after the game." Personally, yeah, I think the commentators had it that I was listening to had it spot on when they said, "Hey, it takes the attention off the players on the whole. It's a discussion between the two coaches, gives us something to write about, a bit of fun before the game, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really play that much into the players, because if you can't get up for this kind of game, why are you playing?"
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I think the thing with Patchell in particular was probably a bigger cause of concern was losing Lee Halfpenny, which all of a sudden meant he had the added responsibility of goal kicking, and he very narrowly missed an early kick, which I think would have settled the nerves. And from there on in, perhaps that had an impact. But likewise, you've got to say that England's defence was very good, and certainly didn't give him anything like the room that he had against Scotland the week before.
No, absolutely not. And if we actually just go into the game now, in the initial opening phases, we saw Wales got into the England 22. We saw a loop around move. Basically, everything looked to be clicking in those first couple of minutes. Do you think part of we've been seeing a lot more loop moves, I think, in the Six Nations? Do you think that's been part of what they've all picked up from Sexton from the Lions tour, that we've all kind of brought that back?
I think that might well be the case. I think generally it's something that Ireland have done really well, the old Leinster loop for a long time. But I think generally it's a move that works well with the way that the game has just become a bit more open and free flowing this season. So I think it is something that can work really, really well. And when you use it to the right effect, it can be devastating. But I'm sure there's no better exponent of it than Johnny Sexton. So whether it's been picked up directly off the tour or just by watching him do it, he's a fine example of how to pull that move off.
Yeah, and I thought at that point, I thought, hey, you look good. Now you're closer to. I think you're in London, aren't you? So, what really was the weather like? Because from the camera, it looked like it wasn't raining. It looked dry, but everyone was talking about how slippy it was.
Well, yeah, I live in London. I've driven the opposite way down the M4 today, back out west. But yeah, it was when I left. You were certainly showing signs of heading to that way. It looked to be a constant drizzle, that kind of difficult type that just keeps the ball wet throughout, and it's picking up moisture as it hits the deck. So I've no doubt it did have an element to play, but at the same time, I don't think that Wales can use that as an excuse, because ultimately you've got to keep that ball retention, and if that means looking to run into a bit more space rather than looking for contact all the time, then so be it. You've got to adapt to the weather conditions. And do you know what I think as well, particularly with the 10-15 axis, And, Anscombe certainly didn't have a flawless game, but I thought he showed some nice glimpses at 10. I think that probably was a move that should have come a little bit earlier in the game and just switched Patchell to fullback and given Anscombe the reins at 10 for a little while is something I'd have employed.
Yeah, I'll come to that in a second. I just want to quickly run through the two tries, as that was kind of what happened. So I tried to run through the game a bit chronologically, these sort of things. So England, basically, we saw what was going to happen for the rest of the game. Then it was a contestable box kick. It gets knocked back. Farrell spots that the defence, basically, or the kind of the kick defence has all been drawn across, and puts in a very clever grubber kick or low kick for May to slide in on. That contestable kicks was one of the big differences between the two sides during the game, wasn't it? That England were kicking a lot shorter than Wales were, who were kicking a bit longer and keeping it in play.
Yep, I think that backfired massively. Wales keeping it in field. Like I said earlier, I think Brown was so good under the high ball that really we were just giving them an opportunity to run it back. And actually, I think one of the few areas that Wales had a bit of joy was at the set piece. And, you saw sending Shingler up at the front seemed to cause at least a few troubles. I know that was while George was on the pitch, but I think it was a mistake to keep kicking the ball in field on those occasions. But credit to England as well, actually, that, for all the talk of Richard Wigglesworth coming back into the squad, I thought Danny Care's box kicking was fantastic. Maybe it's something they've been working on together in training, but yeah, his box kicks were much more effective than Wales, either box kicking or kicking from 10, 15. Yeah,
it's clearly something that Care's been sort of working on over the last couple of years, I think. Now, and I think one of the I love my stats. So one of the stats for me that jumps out was England only got 7 lineouts in that game, whereas Wales had 16, which shows you how Wales never kicked the ball out if they could help it. It was always they kept in play, trusting their kick chase and their suffocating defence. Whereas England were like, no, we want to play in the right area of the pitch, and we're not going to go through any phases unless we're on the Welsh 22 or closer.
And I think that's an area where the game's really been won. I think that they did that brilliantly. The kicking game was much stronger than Wales is, and I think that they saw that there was space in a back three that wouldn't have trained together for most of the week. I think that they saw, and again, Steph Evans' defensive positioning isn't the strongest element of his game. Josh Adams is a bit of a rookie at this level, and Anscombe being drafted into the team at the last minute. I think they saw there was a huge opportunity to catch players out of position and look for territory, and they played that really well.
They did, and just again another stat where England kicked the ball 41 times, Wales 44 times. That's nearly twice as much as a normal game, which showed this probably was a very wet weather mindset from both sides as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't think that's a massive surprise. It just has to, I think sometimes you have to do that, but the key is in the execution, and England definitely executed theirs better than we did today.
They did, and but one of the players you called out was Shingler, and he had a lovely break in the second half, didn't he? He's really grown into the role of there. I just thought perhaps his grubbering it through was the wrong option. He's a back rower. He's not a back who knows how to kick it.
Ambitious, that one. Yeah, that was definitely the wrong decision. I mean, it's hard to put the boot into Shingler too much. So actually, I thought he was fantastic today. He got through a load of the dirty work as usual. He showed that athletic prowess that he's got. He's a very rangy runner when he gets going, and yeah, he just had to look for contact or look for support there. Anything but the grubber kick, and that might have been put a different context in the second half.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of this was about those. This game came down to moments, think, and composure. That when you've only got 2 tries in a game, it comes down to moments. England were clinical with their 2 tries and took the right decisions, and then basically failed to break down the Welsh defence for the rest of the game. Whereas Wales, there were a couple of times like that where it wasn't quite the right decision. And if we're going to talk about decisions, we should talk about the TMO, really, and moments, because to me, that was a trial day with Gareth Anscombe.
Yeah, I have. I've looked at this a number of times, and when I saw it in the first replay, I thought, yeah, that's a try, no problem. And with every subsequent one that I've seen, that to me is one of the worst TMO decisions I've seen for a very long time. It looked absolutely clear cut to me. I think I just honestly, if I watch it another 100 times, I can't see what the outcome is. Now, I think the important thing to stress is that Wales had enough opportunities, or needed to have enough opportunities to go on and win that game regardless. But there's no doubt it was a really poor decision from the TMO, and that might have changed it. That might have changed the complexion of the game because of where the score was at that point. You can't dwell on these things too much, but really, the TMO's got to have a strong hard look at himself there. That was a really, really poor decision.
Yeah, Christopher Edward Bailey on our live chat reckons no way it wasn't a try. And let me just talk you through why I think it was a try. So the TMO said that he couldn't see a clear grounding. I think was his explanation. Now a lot of people would. I got a lot of tweets saying, "Oh, there was no clear control of the ball." Now you don't need control. What you need, I'm sorry, this is pertaining to the viewers, but what you need is is downward pressure on the ball. This control thing is something that commentators have got wrong, and it's not actually worded in the rules. So, to my mind, what we saw was a ball bobbling, a hand on the ball with downward pressure on the grass. Therefore, it's a try. He didn't knock it on, and that's so. So yeah, this idea, and we heard it again from the commentators today. Oh, did he show clear control? You don't need control. You just need to have your hand in touch with the ball while it's in touch with the grass, and then it's a try. So, and that's what I saw. Clearly, the TMO didn't see it clearly, and that's why he didn't give it. But as you say, that didn't decide the game.
No, I don't think it did, and it doesn't alter the fact that I think England were the better side and had certainly, I don't think that was the deciding factor in that game. But it's just frustrating when you've got TMOs there. Because I don't know what he's seen differently to what the rest of us have seen. But yeah, to me, that's a try all day long. I think you're right. There's been a lot of interpretation about the rules because it's changed a couple of times, in the last 10 years or so. But you're right. It's downward pressure. His hand is on the ball. He gets to it first, and has grounded the ball for me. So yeah, it's really frustrating one. But it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. Before we talk about that, we were talking about sort of this Shingler and his hard work. I was amazed when I had a quick look and saw that every single one of the starting 8 Welsh pack had made 10 or more tackles each, which I thought was probably showed again about how England were playing. In fact, they were playing a lot of pick and drives. But Shingler got through 17 tackles, which was about third highest. Corey Hill, who was taking a lot of flack in the press, was on 18, and Josh Navidi, who again, I know you've changed your mind about him, but he put in 19 tackles. Those guys got through a lot of work, and I say some guys who have taken some flack in the press, but I think have come through and answered a lot of their critics there.
Oh, absolutely, and as a Dragons fan, watching Corey Hill, he puts that shift in relentlessly, and I think that it's been fantastic to watch him make that step up in the last 2 games. I think he's been fantastic. He's got through so much graft, and he does add an element of athleticism as well to the second row. He's one of those kind of locks, which is good. I'm delighted for Navidi as well. Like you say, I've been my doubts have been proven wrong, which I was always happy to be the case, because you can't question his work rate. But then likewise, actually, I think Tipuric really made an impact coming off the bench with that strip, and he's so comfortable on the ball all the time that he is one of those players that you trust when he's out on the field. But all in all, as well as I think the Welsh back row kind of acquitted themselves, I still think you miss a Sam Warburton in that back row, just for the turnovers, for the slowing the ball down, for his much underrated carrying ability. It's a game today more than any that you would love to see Warby out on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think slowing the ball down was a key thing, wasn't it? England, when they got fast ball, especially when they got this way too, looked dangerous. And I think perhaps the Welsh weren't very, dare I say it, streetwise. If we look at the penalty count, England gave up 10 penalties to Wales's 2. And I think we're seeing there that England were more streetwise in slowing the ball down, deciding, here's a good point for us to give up 3 points rather than 5 or 7, and perhaps Wales need to be a bit more sort of naughty, if I can perhaps put it a bit more.
And I think that the one occasion where we looked like we did do that, we went on and conceded the try as well. So yeah, look, that's a part of the game, isn't it? I know it's not the most easy on the eye, but that's where big test matches can be won and lost. And I think that's just another area that England probably had they had the edge on Wales there.
Yeah, I talk about penalties. Obviously gave some opportunities. So like on 32 minutes when we had that whole scuffle, you think, right, we've just had a scuffle. It's taken the heat and the tempo out of the game, and you've got a penalty. Now, I understand when you get a penalty in that situation and you've had the upper hand, you've got the momentum, and then you go for the corner. But when the heat's been taken out of the game, everyone's kind of the momentum's gone. I thought that was a wrong decision. I thought they should have gone for sticks at that point.
Definitely the wrong decision. I think if Lee Halfpenny's on the pitch, he's going for sticks all day long there. Yep. It was definitely a kickable penalty, and Patch certainly wouldn't have missed that on length. I think that was definitely something that was always going to be a massive hindrance. Again, so much has been said about Halfpenny this week, given his kind of, let's be honest, the performance against Scotland was fantastic, and getting 2 tries was superb, but it wasn't as if he was running from 50 yards out making breaks. It was a much more pragmatic performance, and it was brilliant defensively. And really, that's what we missed today, was that defensive organisation and his spotless goal kicking, which would have made a big difference today. It's just those comfortable things, and also not having bigger to offer that as well.
Yeah, and I think we've seen from actually from both cases. I mean, Brown gets lots of flack as well, as does Halfpenny, and he got man of the match today because he was solid under the high ball. And it's going back to Warburton's point that he made last week, your fullback has to be errorless. Okay, they've got to not make mistakes, and that's what you get in those 2 guys. You don't get the flashiness of Watson or maybe Williams, who can go back there, but you also don't get the mistakes that those players can sometimes bring along as well. So I think that's we saw that sort of mirrored on both sides. That England had Brown, who was faultless, got man of the match, and Wales were missing Halfpenny. I just also want to touch on some of the style of play. It got a bit better, but I mean, at one point I put a tweet out saying that England have made 99 passes and 100 runs. Now they ended up with doing 168 passes, 157 runs, but yeah, they weren't very expansive, were they? Unless there was a lot of pick and going, there was a lot of one-out runners there.
Yeah, and again, it's another example of playing the conditions, but that's not to say that's not to detract from that, because when you adopt that game plan, you've still got to carry it out. And there were far too many knock-ons from Wales today, and I know that the conditions will have played a part in that. But when the ball's wet, you've got to be able to adapt and to hang on to the ball, and we struggled in that regard today. Whereas England's pulled it off, and they took their chances when they arose. If you keep it tight and you get 2 opportunities and you score 2 tries, it's hard to argue with.
Yeah, Wales, just to give the contrast, 212 passes off 161 runs, which shows that they played a lot more expansive running rugby. And one of the things we said was, like, early on, you said the loop pass and how that matches the modern expansive game. What we're seeing here is one team that is playing a modern game, and one team is playing a very traditional game. So I'm not sure how on a dry patch how well this is going to suit England going forwards, but whether they're adapting. It's hard to say when you only lost 1 game in two years, but
yeah, I mean, it is hard to say. I think that, let's be brutally honest. If we were having this conversation, if this game had taken place before the Wales-Scotland game, and we hadn't had a chance to see Wales play at that kind of tempo and play it and pull it off to winning effect, then it might be a bit different. Let's be honest. This tournament is the first time in a very long time that we've seen Wales play as attractive a rugby as this. But today wasn't really about that. It was about winning the battle up front and taking your chances when you got them, and that's what England managed to do.
Yeah, I think and that's something actually we saw from I guess that we saw in the first Lions test. Sorry, just to go off on a tangent here. Is we saw a New Zealand team that there'd been lots of talk about them being expansive and great runners, and yet they decided, right, yeah, against this Lions side, what we have to do is win it up front, show that we're a sort of forward force in New Zealand, and did just exactly that. So yeah, there are times to make that kind of statement, and today was perhaps one of those. I thought Wales made the best or looked most dangerous when they were offloading, and I thought when they ran 3 or 4 players into a gap and got offloaded, that's when they got they had some success. Obviously, it's easy to do it off when you're off front football, but yeah, no, that offloading game when it came off looked good, and when it didn't, as you say, there were too many balls hit the grass, either knock-ons or passes just not going to hand.
Yeah, late on in the game, I think it started to click, which was probably just a little bit too late. And there was some nice stuff. I think Anscombe in particular, and again Shingler were kind of 2 good exponents of that. And when it does work, it looks phenomenal. But it's high risk. It's high risk, high reward, because when it doesn't work, you do end up on the back foot all too often. But at the same time, look, I'd rather Wales play like that all day long. It's something that's inherent in the Welsh DNA to look and have that sense of adventure while playing. So as disappointing as it is to lose, and it is never fun losing to England, but it's still a step in the right direction. I certainly don't think there are things we got wrong today, but when they do play that game and they get it right, it's great to watch. And I think you, as we said before, you're going to have more up your sleeve if you're going to be trying to contend for the World Cup in 2019.
Yeah, Rugby Gaming Hub on the live chat says, do you think Wales going into the game with a similar head as they did against Scotland was the wrong decision? No, I don't. I think actually they do need to expand that game plan, get used to playing that game plan, and say, right, this is our style of play. And you see the best teams, whilst they adapt to an opposition, this is our style of play that's slightly tweaked for the opposition. It's not we revert entirely depending on who we're playing against. I'm a great believer in that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're preaching to the converted in that regard. Yeah, I think it's really important that Wales carry on playing this way and keep more up their sleeve, because we saw, how effective I know he hates the expression Warren Ball, but it's a style of rugby that we all recognise, and it was effective for a very long time. But it's really important that they get used to playing this style of rugby. And to be perfectly honest, to be able to go there at Twickenham and give England a good game on a wet day with a huge, was it 7 or 8 Lions missing from the Wales 23? So to be able to do that, I think it's starting to show that A, the intent is there, B, the skill set is there, and C, maybe even the strength in depth is starting to develop. With 18 months to go to the World Cup, that's not a bad position to be in.
Very true. But there's a guy out of Australia called Ben Darwin, and he believes a lot in the connectivity of players and being used to playing with each other, and by picking units when you have like they have done with Scarlets, and being able to do that when you've got injury issues really helps, because the players know what each other's going to do, and whilst they might not be comfortable in the international environment, they're comfortable in the players who are around them. And I think that's worked really well.
Yeah, it has, and I think obviously particularly last week was a great example of that. But even today, you can see some of those combinations when they click. That familiarity is, and I think Hadley Parkes again at certain points today, he showed his class, and I think that made Scott Williams a bit more comfortable around him. So when it works, absolutely. I think it's just accelerated things, actually. Whether or not Gatland was going to make this many changes if everyone was available to him at the start of the tournament, difficult to say. And gut say, yeah, I see you shaking your head there, and my gut would agree with that. But whether it's by design or by accident, he has stumbled across here a way of playing in a back line with some real potential to cause trouble to most teams in the world. So has to stick with it.
He does. And I'm going to take one of your fact or fictions from your last podcast. Fact or fiction, should we always pick on form going forward? And the answer is no. Sorry, you can't just click on form. You can't keep just twitching and changing because this is the guy who's playing best at the moment.
Yeah,
you have to build those combinations up. You have to, form is temporary, class is permanent. Just use another cliche. You've got to build those combinations and let players get comfortable in the international environment. So no, I don't think he would have made such drastic changes, and I don't think you should always pick on form. I think you should be that people need to have the experience in the environment.
Yeah, they do. But yeah, I think it's good. I think you're starting to see players grow. And look, that was a tough day at the office for the likes of Josh Adams, and Steph Evans showed some glimpses in there. But again, they'll grow off the back of that, and it gives you more options as you head deeper into a World Cup cycle. You know that you've got players who have the capability of doing it, and then as you start to see the likes of North coming back into form, as you see Liam Williams come back to full fitness, they're good selection dilemmas to have.
They are. Those two guys. This really wasn't their type of game. It wasn't a wet game. Wasn't really there. They didn't really get to show their class in this game, unfortunately. It was interesting to see Josh Adams gets shifted to 15, as I think everyone just went, "Oh, I've never seen him play there before. How's he going to do?" And maybe got called out a little bit positionally, but didn't disgrace himself.
No, he didn't at all. And I think it was a tough afternoon for him. Really, like you say, it wasn't going to be his kind of game. Certainly wasn't going to get a huge amount of space at any point during the fixture. But I've been impressed with what I've seen with him so far. I think he's looked quite comfortable at Test match levels. So it's a nice conversation to have, a nice problem to have. When you're going into when you're going deeper into the tournament. So I think he did fine. I definitely thought it was an eyebrow raiser to bring Patchloff when you had no recognised 15 option, which I do wonder is it looked to me like the shepherd's crook had come out for Patchell, and Gatland just wasn't comfortable with him being out on the field.
Yeah, George North is to me as a starter, he's not a bench player. He just doesn't. He's not versatile enough to come off the bench and sit in slots in too many roles. I guess he can play 13 as well as wing, but on the whole, I think he's someone you either start or you don't have in your 23.
Yeah, maybe. I think today was a slightly unusual example in that. I would agree with you in the most part, but I think as he's had kind of not so much rugby, I'm not sure they would have necessarily been confident in him to go the whole way. So I think that's probably the scenario. And again, also, if there hadn't been the injury to Halfpenny, then there's a lot more fluidity within that back line, as in players who can shift around different positions. When you lost that and had to draft in Watkin at the last minute, it then leaves you a bit more exposed in that regard. But yeah, I agree. I don't think we'll see George North on the bench in too many more occasions. But then again, we watched Jamie Roberts on the bench for most of last year, and I would very much say that Jamie's not a bench player either.
True. I guess if you've got Anscombe on the bench with him, and you've got Halfpenny and Pratchell out there, you've got three players who can shift around quite a bit. So maybe you can then afford to have someone who's not quite so versatile in there. So I guess two things we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about England's second try, and we haven't also talked about Williams's near try towards the end there. So I think those are probably two we should probably cover off on before we finish. And again, the second try was English second try was a matter of getting into 22, going through the phases, and then a lovely bit of work from Launchbury with the offload there.
Yeah, I mean, that was an amazing offload. Again, I don't know how much it was just hoping that someone was inside, but even if it was, it came off, and Johnny May read it perfectly. So I think you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt there. That was a little bit of magic actually, and it came off the back of some great pressure from England. Pick and go really put Wales under enormous pressure. They gave away the penalty, and it just meant that they were going to be stretched, and it gave that opportunity out wide. So that was just a moment of genius. And likewise, I think that cover tackle from Sam Underhill was a moment of genius as well, to be honest. you know, I think in that scenario, you look back at it and go, "Oh, has Scott dived a bit far out?" But to be perfectly honest, I think he probably did make the right decision. He kind of got stuck in the turf a little bit, but don't take nothing away from Underhill. That was an amazing bit of cover defence, and yeah, obviously he's very, very familiar to viewers in Wales as well from his stint down at the Ospreys, and he's a class act. And you know, I think he's going to be starting for England by the time the World Cup rolls around.
Oh, big call that, and I'll come on second about why. But yeah, I just want to run through. Launchbury, he was obviously the one that got taken off and substituted, but still he got through 13 runs. Finally, only made 11 meters, but hey, he was one of those guys doing that pick and going, and also on the defensive side of things, he got through 17 tackles in his 60 odd minutes. So it's yeah. I was having him down as being one of the better players of England, and perhaps one of the man of the match. He stayed on for the full, or at least in that man of the match conversation. I thought he was one of England's better players. But also on that offload, if you notice, there's May, but there's also Brown stood next to him. So yeah, was he aiming for May? No, he was aiming for a space where there should be players flooding through, and yeah, one of the two was going to catch it because they were there.
You know someone's going to be there, and sure enough, you know, May read it. So well played. But yeah, I mean, on Joe Launchbury, I just think he's a terrific player. He's, you know, you very rarely see him have a bad game. And on top of those stats that you highlighted, you know, the defensive work he got through, I thought that was something that England did really well. Was they were driving back the Welsh ball carriers, and good ball carriers as well. You know, Alan Wynne-Jones they did not make life easy for him today. Again, he put in another enormous shift, but you know, a lot of the times he was getting the ball and getting driven back a good few yards. So yeah, Launchbury, I think he's just very, very impressive again.
Yeah, a very good game. And then talking about the Sam Underhill one, yeah, I think sliding for the line was the right option in greasy conditions. What was very clever about the Sam Underhill tackle is that he also tried to slide and basically tried and slid the player out, which I've not kind of noticed a player try and do before as a sort of tackle technique. So yeah, no, it was a very clever. I think it was a very clever tackle as well. We've had a bunch of comments in the live chat. So hard to watch as a Welsh fan as they drop the ball on every strong attack. Yeah, that was a problem. Yeah, it was mistakes. Very true, Toby Jones in the live chat there. But so you reckon Sam Underhill will be playing for England at the Rugby World Cup alongside Vunipola and?
I think probably Rob Shaw switching to blindside. Personally, I think he's always been a blindside. I think he does a fantastic job. You know, he's kind of much maligned, or he was much maligned for a while, and I always thought he was a great player just playing out of position. And I think Underhill does offer a much bigger threat over the ball. He's very good defensively, and I think he's a proper 7. I think, you know, you do that. I'm not a big fan, as fantastic a player as Courtney Law is. I don't see him as a 6 at all. Personally, I think the same with Mario Itoje. I think they're both fantastic ball carrying, athletic second rows. So yeah, if I was Eddie Jones, I'd have had that as a back row, because you know Rob Shaw's going to get through all the tackling and do a hell of a lot of donkey work for you, and he'll also pick up, you know, 1 or 2 bonus turnovers as well. So, you know, as well as being a leader out there on the pitch. So I think, yeah, I think Underhill's is the best 7 available to England.
Yeah, maybe. And one of the things that Haskell talked about when there was a lot of criticism about him being in the side was that it's not about what each individual player does; it's about the balance of the 3 players across the back row. And I think by putting Sam Simmonds at 8, what you were doing is kind of replacing the Haskell tackler, and that they brought Courtney Laws in to be sort of the Vunipola heavy carrier. In the end, today Launchbury did most of that rather than Laws. But hey, so I could see Sam Simmonds switching to 6 and playing Sam Simmonds, Vunipola, and either Rob Shaw or Underhill on that other side. We'll see how he goes.
Yeah, I mean Simmonds I thought went well again today. Actually, I mean we're talking earlier about Shingler's athletic ability, and Simmonds brings that as well. He's got some out and out gas, and yeah, I could see him working at 6 or 8. I think he's going to be around that squad for quite some time.
Yep. So yeah, those 4 will rotate somehow in there, I think. I've kind of run through all the things I wanted to have a quick chat about. Anything that, any points you want to finish off on?
Well, I was going to thank you for being gracious in victory, which would have been very easy to lord it over me. And no, it's been good. I've really enjoyed it, and I'd like to say I think I do think England were the better side today. The villain in the piece was the TMO for me. I thought that was one of the worst decisions I've ever seen. But likewise, given how bad the weather conditions were, I thought it was a pretty good Test match all in all.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one, and obviously getting the win. A bit disappointed, obviously, that there was only like one score after about 20-something minutes, and that all the scoring was in the first quarter, which is a bit of a shame. But no, thank you very much for coming on. It's been very enjoyable turning to you, and everyone who's watching. Don't forget to subscribe and listen to the Attacking Scrum podcast. All your Welsh rugby knowledge, views, opinions are there. It's one that I listen to every week to make sure I keep up on Welsh rugby. So do subscribe to that one. And where can they get hold of you on social media and stuff?
So we're on Twitter at Attacking Scrum. On Facebook, you can search for Attacking Scrum as well. We've got a Facebook page, and we've also got a Facebook group as well, which is just called Wales Rugby Fans, which again is a bit less about the podcast and just a bit more about people kind of jumping on and having a bit of a chat. So I dare say that will have exploded over the last hour or so.
You really get on there and do some moderating. And obviously, I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul. Don't forget to please click below to subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast as this is going out as a podcast as well. And don't forget, obviously, there's also the webpage and Twitter handle, which is my kind of place that I love to hang out. So catch you all again probably next weekend not next weekend, sorry, the weekend after next from memory. I've got it's France versus Italy. I'll be doing a live post-game reaction to, and England versus, it'll be Scotland, isn't it? I think it must be. So I'll be doing a live show after that as well. So catch those two live shows as well next in a fortnight's time. Thanks for joining us, and catch you all later.